I woke up to the deep, rumbling sound of heavy machinery right outside my window. Groggy and confused, I pulled back the curtain, and my stomach dropped. 3 massive bulldozers were parked across my driveway, blocking me in completely. Their engines idled, growling like they were waiting for orders. And there, standing in front of them with her arms crossed and a smug little smirk, was Nancy Williams, the HOA president. I stepped outside, still in my pajamas, heart pounding with a mix of confusion and anger. "What the hell is this?" I demanded, looking from the bulldozers to Nancy. "You can't just block my driveway." Nancy's smirk widened as she clasped her hands together like a teacher dealing with a misbehaving student. "Oh, but we can, James," she said, her voice dripping with fake politeness. "Your property is in violation. The board has authorized immediate action." She gestured toward my front yard, like it was some kind of crime scene. I glanced at my garden, the neat rows of vegetables I had spent months tending to. Tomatoes, bell peppers, lettuce, all growing strong. My little piece of peace after years of working brutal hours as a lawyer. I had left the stress behind to enjoy something real, something simple. And now Nancy, with her iron grip on the neighborhood, wanted to rip it all out. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to stay calm. "Nancy, my property deed predates your HOA by 30 years. You don't have authority over me." Her smile faltered for a split second before she pulled out her phone and started tapping away. "That's not how this works, James," she said. "I'm documenting this violation. The board has already approved fines, and if you don't comply, we'll escalate further." Behind her, a few neighbors had gathered, watching the scene unfold. I could see Mr. Jenkins from across the street, arms crossed, shaking his head. He had been Nancy's target last month, fined for painting his mailbox the wrong shade of green. This wasn't just about me. This was about control. I turned back to Nancy, voice steady. "Are you really going to waste HOA money trying to destroy a vegetable garden?" Nancy's expression hardened. "I suggest you remove it before we start charging you daily fines." I clenched my jaw, staring at the bulldozers, then at her. This wasn't just about some HOA rule. This was personal. And she had no idea just how badly she had messed up. What would you do if your HOA not only harassed you, but was stealing thousands from your neighbors? Nancy had always treated the HOA like her personal kingdom, handing out fines and warnings like they were royal decrees. It wasn't just me she had targeted. She had been making life miserable for plenty of people in the neighborhood. There was Mr. Thompson, who got slapped with a $500 fine because the wheelchair ramp he built for his daughter wasn't in an approved color. He fought it, but the board ignored him until he finally gave in and repainted it. Then there was Mr. Reynolds, a retired veteran who had proudly put up an American flag in his front yard. The HOA told him the pole was too tall by a few inches and threatened legal action if he didn't take it down. Nancy didn't care about improving the neighborhood. She cared about control. She acted like a queen, making up rules and enforcing them however she pleased. Most people were too exhausted to fight back, choosing to pay the fines rather than deal with the endless back and forth. That was exactly what she counted on. Then she set her sights on me. The day after our confrontation in the driveway, I found a bright orange violation notice taped to my front door. It was the usual HOA nonsense, official-sounding language about unapproved agricultural activity and landscaping violations. The kicker? A $50 daily fine until I removed my vegetable garden. I did the math in my head. If I ignored them for just 1 month, that was $1,500 in fines. I took the notice inside and added it to my growing file labeled HOA nonsense. This was different, though. It felt targeted. Nancy wasn't just enforcing rules. She wanted me gone. That evening, as I was flipping through old property records, my phone rang. It was Eleanor Ramos, the elderly woman who had lived in the neighborhood longer than anyone. Her voice was soft but urgent. "James, dear, you're not the first. Nancy's been getting bolder. Last month she fined the Hendersons for having their front door painted the wrong shade of blue. And the Thompsons? They had to pay $500 just to keep their daughter's wheelchair ramp." My blood boiled. "That can't be legal." "It's not," Eleanor said, "but not everyone has the time or money to fight it." I took a deep breath. I did have the time. I did have the money, and I wasn't about to let Nancy push me around. The next morning, I walked straight into the HOA office with my violation notice in hand. Nancy was there, sitting behind her oversized desk, flipping through papers like she had more important things to do. She barely looked up. "Ah, James. Here to pay your fine?" I placed the notice on her desk. "Number, I'm here to remind you that my property deed predates your HOA by 30 years. I have exemptions. You can't fine me for a rule that doesn't apply to my land." Nancy leaned back in her chair and gave me that same smug smile. "That's not how it works." I folded my arms. "Actually, that's exactly how it works. I have documents proving it." Nancy sighed, pulled out her phone and started typing. "Well, you can bring those to the board hearing, but I wouldn't waste my time if I were you." I stared at her. She wasn't even trying to argue the facts. She had already decided how this would end. Nancy wasn't going to play fair. And if I thought an exemption would stop her, I was dead wrong. The next morning, I was about to head outside when I heard the deep, rumbling growl of heavy machinery. My stomach sank. I rushed to the window and froze. 3 massive bulldozers were parked across my driveway, blocking my truck completely. The drivers sat inside, engines running, waiting for orders. And there, standing in front of them, was Nancy. This time she wasn't alone. Beside her stood a tall man in a dark suit, flipping through a folder like he had better things to do. I didn't recognize him, but I could guess who he was before Nancy even opened her mouth. "James, meet Robert Taylor, the HOA's legal counsel. He's here to make sure this gets handled properly." Robert looked up from his papers and gave me a polite but cold smile. "Mr. Anderson, your violations are so severe that immediate action is necessary. The HOA has the right to remove unauthorized structures that violate community guidelines." He gestured toward my garden like it was a pile of garbage instead of carefully planted rows of vegetables. I crossed my arms. "That's funny, Robert, because from where I'm standing, this looks a whole lot like trespassing." Nancy scoffed. "Oh, James, always so dramatic. If you had just followed the rules like everyone else, we wouldn't be here." I could feel my hands tightening into fists, but I forced myself to stay calm. I wasn't about to let them bulldoze my property. Not today. I needed to stall. "All right," I said, pretending to think it over. "Let's be reasonable. Maybe there's a way to sort this out without heavy machinery." Nancy raised an eyebrow. "You're wasting time." "No, I just want to understand my options," I replied, pulling my phone from my pocket as casually as I could. While I pretended to scroll through messages, I quickly texted Martha from the county clerk's office. If anyone could help me, it was her. Meanwhile, neighbors had started to gather, drawn in by the sight of 3 giant bulldozers parked in front of my house. Mr. Jenkins stood on his porch with his arms crossed. The Patel family whispered to each other, pointing in my direction. Even the Henderson kids had stopped their bikes to watch. Nancy noticed them too. I saw the flicker of frustration in her eyes as she turned back to me. "Enough stalling. Start the removal." The bulldozer engines roared louder. I felt my phone buzz in my hand. Martha had responded. I glanced at the message and smiled. "Actually, Nancy, I think you might want to hit the brakes on this one." Her face twisted in annoyance. "And why is that?" I took a slow step forward, keeping my voice calm. "Because you just made a very, very expensive mistake." Just as Nancy opened her mouth to give the final order, a black county vehicle pulled up to the curb. The doors swung open, and out stepped Martha from the county clerk's office, carrying a thick folder of documents. Behind her, Sheriff Martinez followed, his expression unreadable. The murmur of the gathered neighbors grew louder. Nancy let out an annoyed sigh. "What is this? We don't need county officials for a simple HOA violation." Martha ignored her and walked straight to me. "James, I brought what you asked for." She set the folder down on the hood of my truck and flipped it open, revealing aged property maps, old deeds, and legal agreements dating back decades. I picked up the top document and turned to face the crowd. "Everyone, listen up. This isn't just about a garden. It's about the land this entire neighborhood was built on." I held up one of the papers and pointed to a highlighted section. "When my family sold this land for development back in the 70s, they kept certain rights. They retained the mineral rights beneath every home in this neighborhood, the utility easements running under the roads, and, most importantly, full exemptions from any future HOA regulations for 5 specific properties, including mine." A hush fell over the crowd. People leaned in closer, trying to process what I had just said. I turned back to Nancy, who looked paler than before, but was still trying to maintain her composure. "That means you, Nancy, have zero authority over my property. And these bulldozers?" I gestured toward the massive machines still idling on my driveway. "They're parked illegally on my private easement. That's trespassing." Nancy's mouth opened and closed a few times before she found her voice. "This is some legal loophole nonsense," she snapped. Sheriff Martinez took a step forward and crossed his arms. "Actually, it's not. These documents are legally binding and predate your HOA, which means James is right. You have no authority here, and you ordered heavy machinery onto land you don't own. That's a serious problem." Nancy turned to Robert, the HOA lawyer, expecting him to jump in. But Robert was flipping through his own papers, his jaw tightening. He muttered something under his breath, then took a step back, suddenly not wanting to be involved. Nancy's confidence cracked. "This doesn't change anything. He still violated HOA rules." The lead bulldozer operator, who had been watching the exchange closely, cut his engine. "Sorry, lady," he said, shaking his head. "I'm not risking my license on this mess. No court order, no demolition." The other operators followed, one by one, turning off their machines. Nancy turned bright red. "You're all cowards!" she hissed. Then, from the back of the crowd, a frail but steady voice spoke up. "Nancy, stop lying!" Everyone turned as Eleanor Ramos stepped forward, leaning on her cane but standing firm. Nancy's expression twisted in frustration. "Oh, please, stay out of this, Eleanor." But Eleanor wasn't backing down. She lifted a folder of her own and held it up for everyone to see. "I think people should know what you've really been doing with our HOA money." The crowd shifted. Whispers spread like wildfire. Eleanor handed me the folder, and I flipped through the papers. My stomach turned. "Over $300,000, I said, my voice louder than I intended. "Gone. Stolen from the HOA's special assessment fees, all of it funneled into a private company, WCE Holdings, LLC, owned by—" I turned to the last page and looked straight at Nancy. "You and Robert." The crowd erupted. Gasps, murmurs, then outrage. Nancy's smug attitude vanished. "That's a lie. That's private HOA business." Sheriff Martinez didn't look convinced. He took the folder from me, flipping through the evidence. Nancy Williams, I think we're going to need to have a serious conversation downtown. Nancy's eyes darted around, looking for support, but no one was on her side anymore. The same neighbors who had once been too afraid to speak up were now angry, demanding answers. Even Robert had quietly stepped away, already making his exit. Nancy took a shaky step back. For the first time, she looked scared. Nancy's face twisted with panic as the weight of everything came crashing down. "This is ridiculous! Lies! Slander!" she shouted, her voice higher than before. She spun toward the crowd, searching for support, but all she saw were cold, angry stares. The same neighbors she had bullied for years were now watching her downfall with quiet satisfaction. Robert, who had been standing stiffly beside her, took a slow step backward. He was smart enough to know when a fight was lost. Without a word, he turned and started walking toward his car, hoping to disappear before things got worse. "Not so fast," Sheriff Martinez called out, stepping directly into Robert's path. "You're both coming with me." Robert let out a frustrated sigh, but he didn't argue. He knew there was no talking his way out of this. Nancy, on the other hand, still refused to accept reality. "You can't do this!" she shrieked, as the sheriff pulled out a pair of handcuffs. "I run this neighborhood. My husband plays golf with the judge." Martinez barely reacted as he turned her around and cuffed her hands behind her back. "Nancy Williams, you're under arrest for trespassing, attempted property destruction, and financial fraud." He nodded toward Robert. "You too." Nancy fought against the cuffs, her voice shaking with fury. "You have no idea who you're messing with." I crossed my arms and looked her dead in the eye. "No, Nancy, you had no idea who you were messing with." For the first time since this whole mess started, she was speechless. As the sheriff led them to his cruiser, the bulldozer operators, who had been awkwardly standing by, waiting for orders, finally climbed into their machines and backed away from my driveway, leaving my garden untouched. A cheer broke out from the crowd. Mr. Jenkins clapped his hands. Eleanor wiped a tear from her eye and smiled. The Patel kids jumped up and down. The people in this neighborhood, the ones who had lived in fear of Nancy's rules for years, were finally free. I took a deep breath and looked down at my hands, still covered in dirt from my garden. I had fought back, not just for myself, but for all of them. And we had won. In the days that followed, the neighborhood felt different, lighter, freer. With Nancy and Robert gone, the HOA board collapsed almost immediately. At an emergency meeting, the remaining members, most of whom had just gone along with Nancy out of fear, voted to dissolve the HOA entirely. No more ridiculous fines, no more surprise inspections, no more threats disguised as rules. Instead, the neighbors came together to write a new set of guidelines, ones that actually made sense. No one would be punished for planting flowers, painting their mailbox the wrong shade of green, or putting up a wheelchair ramp for their child. People could finally enjoy their homes without fear of a petty dictator knocking on their door with a violation notice. Nancy's house was put on the market almost immediately. No one was surprised when she didn't return to pack up her things. Her lawyer handled the sale from a distance. A few months later, a young couple with 2 kids moved in. They introduced themselves on day 1, waving as they set up a lemonade stand in their driveway. It was the kind of neighborly gesture that hadn't been seen around here in years. To celebrate, the entire neighborhood came together for a block party. Long picnic tables stretched across the street, filled with food from every house. Mr. Jenkins set up a grill, the Patel family brought homemade samosas, and Eleanor, despite her age, made her famous peach cobbler. People laughed, talked, and, for the first time in a long time, felt like they truly belonged here. I stood near my garden, watching everything unfold. The same garden Nancy had tried to destroy was now a symbol of something bigger. It wasn't just a bunch of vegetables, it was proof that we had stood up for ourselves, and won. As I knelt down to check on my tomato plants, Eleanor shuffled over, leaning on her cane. She reached down, plucked a ripe tomato from the vine, and placed it in my hand with a knowing smile. "You did good, James," she said. I looked down at the tomato, then back at her. "I never wanted to own the county," I said, shaking my head with a small laugh. "I just wanted to grow my vegetables in peace.